Hi, I'm Bruce Nachbar. I'm the writer and director of北の方へ, to the north. Coming to Japan over 10 years ago, my hope was to create a bridge between Japanese filmmaking and storytelling and a more Western filmmaking and storytelling approach. And after many years, I saw that that was not happening. So I decided to do that on my own, create a truly Japanese story, but come at it from a Western production approach and style. And I hope we succeeded. Prior to coming to Japan, I spent over 20 years in Hollywood in the Bay Area working on a lot of film and television shows. And the experience that I think impacted me the most over my entire career is what I had at Pixar Animation Studios working on Monsters, Inc. For Monsters, Inc., we created the character Sullivan, the big monster, and decided he was going to have dynamic fur, meaning you can't animate all those hair follicles. You had to come up with something, some kind of computer program that would animate the fur, so when he ran and the light hit it or wind hit it, it would move in a very natural way and react to the elements. So they gave it to the genius in the company, Lauren, to come up with how to make dynamic fur. No one had done it up to that point. And he created a test with Sullivan dancing and running and wind and rain and all these different things, maybe a 60-second loop. And we're in the screening room, and it's myself and Lauren and the director, and we're waiting for Steve Jobs to come in and review it with us. So the lights go down, and Steve watches it, and he goes, okay, let's see it again. We watch it a second time, lights come up, and Steve walks to the door and turns to everyone and says, that was good. We don't do good. When I was 7 years old, I went to the Avalon movie theater in Brooklyn, New York with my grandfather, and we sat in the balcony and watched 2001: A Space Odyssey. And when I walked out of the theater that day as a little boy, I thought, this is what I want to do for a living. And so, of course, ever since then, Kubrick has been a huge influence over me. His cinematic style, his storytelling, and the use of a center framing, everything about him I love and I study. It's not so apparent in this film, when you watch this film. For this movie, I was greatly influenced by Stranger Than Paradise, which was Jim Jarmusch's, one of his first films. That naturalistic style and how not really plot driven, it's more about the characters. And I also was very much influenced by David Mamet, more by his writing, in that I tried to keep exposition to a minimum and try to remove all explanation about why the characters are doing what they're doing. I wanted to respect the audience and leave it up to them to decide what motivated these characters based on the actions that they get to watch, as opposed to the characters telling them why they're doing it. My personal taste in films tends to run to the more dramatic. So there was this French film called Diva, The Deer Hunter, most recently was Sicario, are all films that I really loved and thought were amazing pieces of cinema. That's why it's kind of surprising even to myself that when I look at Kita no Hoe, it really is a much, much lighter film with a hopeful message at the end. And I kind of wonder, how did I decide to make that as my first feature film? Perhaps it's the influence of a film that I loved, again, from a very early age, called The Graduate by Mike Nichols with Dustin Hoffman. Filming with a small budget every day brings new and sometimes crazy challenges. There's never enough time or money to do what you want to do, so you're always coming up with solutions. This film was originally called Road to Aomori. Aomori is a town in northern Japan, very far north, and we were filming on a very specific weekend in Aomori because a snow festival was taking place there. So we built our whole schedule about arriving to film during this festival, and we had permission from the festival, and we cast 2 actors local to Aomori to save money instead of having to transport them from Tokyo. So we set off from Tokyo and started filming. We filmed our road trip along the way to Aomori. On the way, we filmed in a town called Aizu, which is about 2/3 of the way there. Beautiful little town. in Fukushima in the mountains. And while we're there, the night before we're leaving for Aomori, a snowstorm came, a blizzard, and we were snowed in and couldn't leave. We couldn't get the vans out, the trains weren't running, and we had to be there in Aomori. That was our only opportunity. If we couldn't film there, we'd have to wait a year, which of course we couldn't do. We couldn't afford to do on an independent movie. As we were sitting there trying to figure out how we were going to salvage and fix the situation, a production assistant came running into the room and told us that Aizu, the town we were in, was also having a snow festival that same weekend, the next couple of days. I mean, incredible luck. We went to the local people who run the festival, begged them, on hands and knees basically, to let us film on this short notice, which eventually they agreed to with a lot of conditions. Some of the conditions were you can't film any of the people, you can only film during these hours, you can only, all these logistical challenges that we said fine, and we had no choice, so we would do it. And then the final thing we had to agree to in writing was that we wouldn't misrepresent the festival, that since we're filming at the Aizu Festival, we need to show that this is the Aizu Festival and not call it the Aomori Festival. And in addition to that, we need to change the title of the film. So that's why it's called To the North or北の方へand no longer Road to Aomori, because we never made it and we had to do what we had to do. What I hope to convey with this film is that you don't need to live down to the expectations that people place upon you, or that maybe even you placed upon yourself that have limited you your whole life. That what people tell you or you tell yourself doesn't dictate what you need to be, that you can strive for more. And also to remember that your past doesn't need to define your future. I've worked on film productions on multiple continents, in the US, UK, China, Japan, and what I found is they each have their own unique challenges. And that could be from food, craft service, work hours, work safety, the way they go about a production. That's not even talking about the differences in storytelling. I've attended film festivals in different parts of the world. One year I was a special guest at the Uganda Film Festival in Kampala, and I also taught a 1-week film production workshop there. And what I found, the Uganda film industry is very young, and the quality of the work is still evolving. But in teaching the workshop and meeting with the filmmakers, what I discovered was this passion and excitement about telling their stories that was incredibly refreshing, that I hadn't experienced from filmmakers in a long time. In other countries where the industry is more developed, I think people get a little bit, they forget how special it is to be able to tell your story to people. They kind of take it for granted maybe a little bit. And that was really, really inspiring. I've also attended the London Film Festival with a film that I brought there. I've been to Sundance with a film that won Best Cinematography. And what they all have in common for me is at a festival, you find an audience that truly loves film and reminds you why you do what you do. I'm really excited that the German film-going audience has embraced Japanese cinema. I can't wait to see what you think of our film that is a little bit different than most Japanese independent films. It's a Japanese story, but told by an American filmmaker. And I hope you enjoy our hybrid creation.